Hi folks, and welcome to another edition of The Slice. Today we're going to continue on a subject matter that I discussed last show with Clarence Mitchell when we were discussing North American giants. So what I've decided to do is, because I don't think many people realize that there's so many different sects of these giants. There's the redheads, there's some that don't have red hair. So what I want to do is kind of show in sections of the country the differences with these giants and what they are, what we're starting to believe, at least in my camp. So what it is the giants of Death Valley, and most of our information is coming from the Paiute Native Americans. So let's go and check out the material on this particular branch of the giants of North America here on The Slice. Located within California's Mojave Death Valley is a place called Furnace Creek. In 1913, in July 10th of 1913, this place got to 136 degrees Fahrenheit. And so yeah, that was pretty hot. But it got its name during the gold rush of 1849, but there's only one recorded death of the prospectors who supposedly named it. Now, for far more than 1,000 years, the Tumbisha Native American tribe has been living in this environment. Anyway, one of the strangest mysteries of Death Valley actually erupted in the summer of 1947. Now remember, this is the same time period as we got the old Washington State sighting and the Roswell crash as well. It was Dr. Bruce Russell, and he was a retired doctor out of Cincinnati, and he said he discovered in 1931 a series of complex tunnels deep below Death Valley. Well, okay. We know that I have another story about this area that had something to do with the government going in and finding like microwave ovens. This is connected to that, and there's something very special about these tunnels. Now, according to the story told by Russell, the caves contain the skeletons of several gigantic men, each around 9 feet in height. Now, he was with a colleague, actually, Dr. Daniel Bovee, who he'd worked on an archaeological excavation in Mexico with beforehand, years past. Now, stumbled upon pretty good terminology for this. He fell head first into the cave. Soil gave way and he fell in. And they were actually in the process of sinking a shaft for a mining claim. The giants that he found were clothing in things that were like jackets and trousers, and they stopped just below the knee. And he said the texture was said to resemble gray-dyed sheepskin, but it might have been from almost anything from the age that it would have been from, which is pre-flood, actually. They came across what they described as a ritual hall in which were found unspecified devices adorned with markings similar to those now used by the Masonic Order. Interesting. Okay, so I thought a good way to continue at this point is to tell you about some of the Paiute Indians who lived in Mojave Desert area of California. There was a Native American called Ogamaki, and he related the following account in appreciation for a story on the Navajo which appeared in the spring of 1948 in a magazine which was carrying numerous articles on the mysterious signs of fires in the skies, which were causing some confusion and debate during that year as well as the years following. Now, the article on the Navajo Nation, which appeared in an earlier issue, told of the suffering that their tribe had gone through during the past winter seasons and encouraged the readership to send goods and supplies to help them. And that would have been for the upcoming winter of 1948-1949. And many people did. In appreciation, though, this Ogamaki fella related the following legend, which was told of the secret history of the Americas, which ran its course possibly thousands of years before white man ever came here. I'm going to read it just like it appeared in the spring of 1948 issue of Fate magazine. Most of you who read this are probably white men of a blood only a century or two out of Europe. You speak in your papers of the flying saucers or mystery ships as something new and strangely typical of the 20th century. How could you but think otherwise? Yet, if you had red skin and were of a blood which had been born and bred of the land for untold thousands of years, you would know this is not true. You would know that your ancestors, living in these mountains and upon these prairies for numberless generations, had seen these ships before and had passed down the story and the legends which are the unwritten history of your people. You do not believe. Well, after all, why should you? But knowing your scornful unbelief, the storytellers of my people have closed their lips in bitterness against the outward flow of this knowledge. Yet I have said to the storytellers this: now that the ships are being seen again, is it wise that we, the elder race, keep our knowledge to ourselves? Thus, for me, an American Indian, some of the sages among my people have talked, and if you care to, I shall permit you to sit and listen. Let us say that it is dusk in that strange place which you, the white man, calls Death Valley. I have passed tobacco to the aged chief of the Paiutes, who sits across a tiny fire from me and sprinkles cornmeal upon the flames. The old chief looked like a wrinkled mummy as he sat there puffing upon his pipe. Yet his eyes were not those of the unseeing, but eyes which seemed to look back on long trails of time. His people had held the Innu, Panamint, and Death Valleys for untold centuries before the coming of the white man. Now we sat in the valley, which white man named for death, but which the Paiute calls Tumisha, the flaming land. Here before me, as I faced eastward, the funerals, which are the mountains forming Death Valley's eastern wall, were wrapped in purple-blue blankets about their feet, while their faces were painted in scarlet. Behind me the Panamints rose like a mile-high wall, dark against the sinking sun. The old Paiute smoked my tobacco for a long time before he reverently blew the smoke to the four directions. And he spoke. You asked if we heard of the great silver airships the days before white man brought his wagon trains to the land? Yes, grandfather, I come seeking knowledge. Among all tribes of my people, grandfather is the term of the greatest respect which one man can pay to another. We, the Paiute nation, have known of these ships for untold generations. We also believe that we know something of the people who fly them. They are called HalfMasus. Well, who are the HalfMasus? They are people of the Panamints, and they are as ancient as Tumisha itself. And then he smiled at my confusion. You do not understand, but of course not. You are not a Paiute. Then listen closely, and I'll lead you back along the trail of the dim past. When the world was young, and this valley, which is now dry, parched desert, was a lush, hidden harbor of a blue water, it was a sea which stretched from halfway up those mountains to the Gulf of California. It is said that the HalfMasus came here in huge rowing ships. They found great caverns in the Panamints, and are in them. They built one of their cities. At that time, California was the island in which the Indians of that state told the Spanish it was, and which they marked so on their maps. Living in their hidden city, the HalfMasus ruled the sea with their fast rowing ships, trading with faraway people and bringing strange goods to the great quays, said still to exist in the caverns. Then, as untold centuries rolled past, the climate changed. The water in the lake went down until there was no longer a way to the sea. First, the way was broken only by the southern mountains, over the tops of which goods could be carried. But as time went by, the water continued to shrink until the day came when only a dry crust was all that remained of the great blue lake. Then the desert came, and the fire god began to walk across Tamisha, the flaming land. When the HalfMasu could no longer use the great rowing ships, they began to think of other means to reach the world beyond. I suppose that is how it happened. We know that they began to use flying canoes. At first they were not large. Those silvery ships with wings, they moved with a slight whirring sound and a dipping movement like an eagle. The passing centuries brought other changes. Tribe after tribe swept across the land, fighting to possess it for a while, and passing like the storm of sand. In their mountain cities, still in the caverns, the HalfMasu dwelt in peace, far removed from these conflicts. Sometimes they were seen in the distance in their flying ships, or riding on the snowy white animals which took them from ledge to ledge up the cliffs. We have never seen these strange animals in any other place. To these people, the passing centuries brought only larger and larger ships, moving always more silently. Have you ever seen a HalfMasu? No, but we have many stories of them. There are reasons why one does not become too curious. Reasons? Yes, these strange people have weapons. One is a small tube which stuns one with a prickly feeling, like a rain of cactus needles. One cannot move for hours, and during this time, the mysterious ones vanish up into the cliffs. The other weapon is deadly. It is a long silvery tube. When this is pointed at you, death follows immediately. What do they look like, and how do they dress? They are beautiful people. Their skin is a golden tint, and a headband holds back their long dark hair. They dress always in white, fine-spun garment which wraps around them and is draped upon one shoulder. Pale sandals are worn upon their feet. This sounds a lot like Romans dress, does it not? And the article goes on to say, his voice trailed away in a puff of smoke. The purple shadows rising up the walls of the funerals splashed like the waves of the ghost lake. The old man seemed to have fallen into a sort of trance, but I had one more question. Has any Paiute ever spoken to a HalfMasu, and were the Paiutes here when the great rowing ships first appeared? He pondered for several moments. I wondered if he had heard me. Yet, as is our custom, I waited patiently for the answer. Excuse me. Once again, he went through the ritual of the smoke breathing to the 4 directions, and then his voice continued. Yes, once in the not-so-distant past, but yet many generations before the coming of the Spanish, a Paiute chief lost his bride by sudden death. In his great and overwhelming grief, he thought of the HalfMasus and their long tube of death. He wished to join her, so he bid farewell to his sorrowing people and set off to find the HalfMasu. None appeared until the chief began to climb the almost unscalable Panamints. Then one of the men in white suddenly appeared before him with the long tube and motioned him back. The chief made signs that he wished to die and came on. The man in white made a long singing whistle and other HalfMasu appeared. They spoke together in strange tongues and regarded the chief thoughtfully. Finally, they made signs to him, making him understand that they would take him with them. Many weeks after his people had mourned him for dead, the Paiute chief came back to his camp, and he had been in the giant underground valley of the HalfMasu. He said there were white lights which burn night and day and never go out or need fuel. This lit an ancient city of marble beauty. There he learned the language and history of the mysterious people, giving them in turn the language and legends of the Paiutes. He said that he would have liked to remain there forever in the peace and beauty of their life, but they bade him return and use his new knowledge for his people. I could not help but ask the inevitable, "Do you believe this story, Chief?" He said, finally, after studying the smoke of wisps, "I do not know. When a man is lost in Tomisha, the fire god is walking across the salt crust. Strange dreams like clouds fog through his mind. No man can breathe the hot breath of the fire god and long remain sane." Of course, the Paiutes have thought of this, and no people knows the moods of Tomisha better than they. You asked me to tell you the legend of the flying ships. I have told you what the young men of the tribes do not know, for they no longer listen to the stories of the past. Now you ask me if I believe. I answer this. Turn around. Look behind you at that wall of the Panamints. How many giant caverns could open there, be it hidden by the lights and shadows of the rocks? How many could open upward, outward, inward, and never be seen behind the arrow-like pinnacles before them? How many ships could swoop down like an eagle from the beyond on a summer night when the fires of the furnace sands above have closed away the valley from the eyes of the white man? How many HalfMasu could live in their eternal peace away from the noise of white man's guns and their unscalable stronghold? This has always been a land mystery. Nothing can change that. Not even white man with his flying engines. For should they come too close to the wall, a sharp wind like the flying arrow can shear off their wings. Tomisha hides its secrets well, even in winter. But no man can pry into them when the fire god draws the hot veil of his breath across the passes. I must still answer your question with my mind in doubt, for we speak of a weird land. White man does not yet know it as well as the Paiutes, and we have ever held it in awe. It is still the forbidden Tomisha, land of the flaming earth. Now, this same legend was also repeated in amazing similarity by an old prospector by the name of Burke Lee in his book Death Valley Men that was published by Macmillan out of New York in 1932. However, Lee stated that it was not a legend but an actual account of the discovery of a now abandoned city within the Panamint Mountains, as he heard it from 3 other people who have claimed to have seen the ancient wonder. Well, okay, so that's the information we have, but I have more. Let's take a look. Let me read this to you. The following information is found on page 277 of Burke Lee's book, Death Valley Men. I have to bring the microphone with me or you won't hear a darn thing. Okay. So, again, in case I didn't get through, on page 277 of Burke Lee's book, Death Valley Men, there's a strange story. So this is how he writes it. This story of a strange tunnel was told after the men had been discussing a local Indian legend, similar in many details to the legend of Orpheus and Eurydice from Greek mythology. Now, we've already talked about this legend, so you should hear some commonality starting. So here's where they're in a conversation, so here's where the conversation picks up. Now, about this tunnel, said Bill with his forehand wrapped in a frown, or forehead. You said this Indian went through a tunnel into a strange country, didn't you? Well, yes, I said. I think I called it a cave or a cavern, but I suppose a miner would call it a tunnel. Why? Well, here's a funny thing, said Bill. How convenient. This Indian trapper living right across this canyon has a story about a tunnel, and it's not 1,000 years old either. Tom Wilson told me that his grandfather went through this tunnel and disappeared. He was gone 3 years, and when he came back, he said he'd been in a strange country, living among strange people. The tunnel is supposed to be somewhere in the Panamint Mountains right there. Not awful far from where we're sitting, which was at Emigrant Canyon near Death Valley. Now, what do you think of that? Now, the same book, Death Valley Men, also tells another little tidbit of a story about this, of an ancient city beneath the Panamint mountain range in southeastern California. Bill Cochran and Jack Stewart, who lives in that area of Death Valley, upon one occasion came across 3 individuals who were experiencing troubles with their automobile. They were kind enough to let the visitors stay at their place for a few days, whereupon the 5 of them became good friends. Because of their generosity, the visitors had decided to let them in on a secret. Thomason looked from Jack to Bill and asked, "How long have you been in this country, Jack?" Okay, well, Jack spoke before Bill had a chance. "Not very long," said Jack quietly. Bill glanced curiously at Jack, but said nothing. If Jack thought about 30 years was not very long, then that was all right with Bill. Okay, so I've been in and out, Thomason says, I've been in and out of the Death Valley country for 20 years, so has my partner. We know where there is a lost treasure. We've known about it for several years, and we're the only men in the world who do know about it. We're going to let you fellas in on it. You've been good to us. You're both fine fellas. You haven't asked us any questions about ourselves, and we like you. So we think you can keep a secret. So we'll tell you ours. There's a lost treasure house, a lost city of gold. It's bigger than any mine that was ever found or ever will be. It's bigger than the United States Mint, said White, and body shaking. It's a city thousands of years old and worth billions of dollars. Billions of dollars. Billions, billions, billions. Okay, so, yeah, and then they talk about the boats. Apparently they're loaded into boats. This is something new that I haven't seen. Boats, demanded. Boats in Death Valley. There used to be a lake in Death Valley. I heard the fishing was fine. So, again, it's about the caverns under the mountains, treasure houses within the caverns, and check out this book, Men of Death Valley Men, and it's by Berkeley. It should be interesting to say the least. I've got a copy I'm going to get. So, anyway, that's this week's show on the Giants of Death Valley. And next week we'll tackle another giant family, to be determined. Have a great day, folks.